What if I told you that buying a home doesn't always make you richer, and that in some cases, renting could actually put you ahead financially? Most people believe homeownership is the ultimate wealth-building move, but the truth is much more complex. So today, we're breaking down renting versus buying, and which option truly builds more wealth. Let's start by looking at the big picture. 1. The myth of homeownership as an automatic investment. For generations, buying a house has been seen as the American dream. You work hard, save up for a down payment, buy a home, and over time, it grows in value while you build equity. On the surface, it seems like a guaranteed path to wealth. But here's the truth. A home is primarily a place to live, not always an investment vehicle. Unlike stocks or bonds, it doesn't generate passive income unless you're renting it out. And while it can appreciate, it also comes with massive costs: interest, property taxes, maintenance, insurance, and closing fees that eat into your returns. If you bought a home for $300,000 and sold it 10 years later for $400,000, you might think you made a $100,000 profit. But after paying mortgage interest, taxes, repairs, realtor fees, and other expenses, the actual profit could be far lower, sometimes even negligible. So the question isn't just buy or rent. It's really, what's the smarter financial move after considering all costs? 2. The true costs of buying. When most people compare renting and buying, they look at the monthly mortgage versus the monthly rent. But that's only scratching the surface. Let's break down the hidden costs of homeownership that beginners often overlook. First, the down payment. To buy a $300,000 house, you may need $60,000 up front if you're putting 20% down. That's money you could have invested elsewhere, potentially earning 6 to 8% annually in the stock market. Second, mortgage interest. If your loan is $240,000 at 6% interest over 30 years, you'll pay more than $280,000 in interest alone. Yes, some of that is offset by home appreciation, but it's still a huge expense. Third, property taxes and insurance. These vary by location, but they can add thousands per year. In some states, property taxes alone can be 2% of your home's value annually, meaning a $300,000 house costs $6,000 a year just in taxes. Fourth, maintenance. Experts recommend budgeting 1 to 2% of your home's value annually for upkeep. On that $300,000 home, that's another $3,000, $6,000 per year for repairs, renovations, and unexpected issues like plumbing or roof leaks. So while you're building equity, you're also bleeding cash. For many buyers, this means they're not actually building wealth as quickly as they think. 3. The advantages of renting. Now, let's flip the perspective. Renting often gets a bad reputation. People say you're throwing money away every month because you're not building equity. But this isn't the full story. Renting comes with its own financial advantages. First, flexibility. Renters aren't tied down to one location. If your career requires you to move, or if you want to chase better opportunities, renting makes it easy. That flexibility alone can lead to higher income growth compared to being locked into a mortgage in one place. Second, predictable expenses. Renters don't pay property taxes, major repairs, or homeowner's insurance. The water heater breaks. It's not your $3,000 problem, it's your landlord's. That financial predictability frees up money for other investments. Third, the investment opportunity. Remember that $60,000 down payment in our earlier example. A renter doesn't need to tie up that money in a house. Instead, they could invest it in the stock market or other assets. Over 10 years at a 7% annual return, that $60,000 grows to almost $120,000 without the headaches of homeownership. Finally, lower transaction costs. Buying and selling a house comes with massive fees, closing costs, realtor commissions, appraisal fees, inspections, and more. Renters simply avoid all that. 4. The key factor, opportunity cost. The real debate between renting and buying often comes down to one thing: what you do with the money you save. If you rent, you must be disciplined with your extra cash. Instead of inflating your lifestyle, you invest it in stocks, index funds, real estate syndications, or even your own business. That's how renting can make you richer in the long run. On the other hand, if you buy, you're forcing yourself to build equity over time through your mortgage payments. Even if your home doesn't skyrocket in value, you're at least slowly owning a valuable asset. In that sense, buying acts as a form of forced savings for people who aren't good at investing on their own. So neither option is automatically better, depends on your habits. Renting is often financially superior if you're an active investor. Buying can work well if you need a disciplined way to grow wealth passively. 5. When buying makes more sense. There are certain scenarios where buying clearly outshines renting. One major factor is how long you plan to stay in the property. If you'll be in the same home for at least 7 to 10 years, buying becomes much more attractive because you'll have enough time to spread out the transaction costs and ride out short-term market fluctuations. Another factor is location. In some markets, the cost of rent is nearly as high as a mortgage payment. Renting a decent place costs you $2,000 a month, and your mortgage would also be around $2,000. Then buying may be smarter, because you'll be building equity instead of just paying rent. Stability is another key advantage. When you own your home, your monthly payments are predictable, especially if you have a fixed-rate mortgage. Renters are vulnerable to rent increases, which can price them out of their neighborhood over time. And let's not forget lifestyle benefits. Owning gives you control. You can renovate, customize, and truly make a place yours. For families, the stability of homeownership can mean a consistent school district, community, and social network. While these don't directly translate into dollars, they have a long-term impact on quality of life, which many people value just as highly as financial gain. 6. When renting is the smarter choice. On the other hand, renting makes more sense if you're in a stage of life where flexibility is more valuable than stability. If you're early in your career and might need to relocate for better opportunities, renting saves you from being stuck with a property that takes months or even years to sell. It's also the smarter choice in overheated housing markets. When prices are sky-high relative to local incomes, buying can lock you into decades of debt with little chance of meaningful appreciation. Renting allows you to live in desirable areas without overcommitting financially. And if your finances aren't stable, yet meaning you don't have a solid emergency fund, a strong credit score, or stable income, then renting is often the wiser path. Buying before you're financially ready can turn a dream home into a financial nightmare. 7. The rent versus buy rule of thumb. One simple way to analyze whether renting or buying makes more sense is by using the price-to-rent ratio. Here's how it works. You take the price of the home you're considering and divide it by the annual rent for a comparable property. For example, if a home costs $300,000 and similar homes rent for $1,500 per month or $18,000 per year, the price-to-rent ratio is about 16. Generally, a ratio under 15 means buying is usually more favorable, while a ratio above 20 often means renting is the smarter choice. Of course, this is a rough guideline, but it helps cut through the noise and gives you a clearer financial picture. 8. The hidden wealth factor. Investing the difference. Here's the real secret. Whether renting or buying makes you richer depends less on the property and more on what you do with the money you don't spend. If renting saves you thousands each month and you invest that money consistently, you can absolutely outpace a homeowner's wealth growth. Let's run the numbers. Suppose you rent for $1,500 instead of buying a home with a $2,500 monthly mortgage. That's $1,000 in monthly savings. If you invest that $1,000 every month into a diversified index fund at an average 7% return, in 20 years, you'd have about $520,000. That's $500,000 without ever owning a home. Meanwhile, the homeowner will have equity in their property. But once you factor in all their costs, repairs, taxes, and interest, the difference might not be as dramatic as people assume. In some cases, the renter-investor actually comes out ahead. 9. Emotional versus financial decisions. One thing that often gets overlooked in this debate is that buying a home isn't always a purely financial decision. For many people, it's about security, family stability, and pride of ownership. Owning a home is deeply emotional, and sometimes those feelings outweigh the numbers. That's not wrong, just means you should be honest with yourself. If you're buying primarily for lifestyle reasons, that's perfectly valid. But don't convince yourself it's always the most profitable move. If your goal is to maximize wealth, renting plus investing often wins. If your goal is stability and lifestyle, then buying could be worth the trade-offs. 10. The final verdict. So, which actually makes you richer? Renting or buying? The truth is, it depends on your financial discipline, your market, and your lifestyle goals. Buying tends to favor people who want long-term stability and prefer a passive way to build equity over decades. Renting favors people who value flexibility and are disciplined enough to invest aggressively with the money they save. If you're not investing the difference, renting won't make you rich. But if you are, it can absolutely rival or even beat homeownership as a wealth-building strategy. That's why the smartest move isn't simply choosing renting or buying. It's choosing the strategy that aligns with your personal financial habits and long-term goals. And here's the takeaway. Don't let social pressure or outdated advice dictate your decision. Run the numbers, know your priorities, and make the choice that truly builds your wealth, not just what looks good on paper. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. On this channel, we simplify wealth-building strategies, real estate insights, and smart money moves, so you can take control of your financial future. Don't miss the next video.